You're listening to Creativity Unconfined. Stay tuned to learn about how the arts unlock the doors for those who are imprisoned.
Greetings. My name is, as always, Dave Gussack, and I remain the director for the Florida State University Institute for the Arts and Art Therapy with the Imprisoned, and welcome to yet another episode of Creativity Unconfined. I'm very excited about this episode, as I believe I say that for many of the episodes, but I truly do mean it. And I get this opportunity to talk to people that I get to work with. I get to basically share this wonderful stage with. And today I'll be introducing Annie Buckley. Now, Annie Buckley is a multidisciplinary creative leader and the founding director of the Institute for the Arts, Humanities, and Social Justice at San Diego State University, where she is also professor of visual studies. If that's not enough hats, she is the founder and director of Prison Arts Collective, which has brought art to over 10,000 people in 15 prisons since 2013, as well as Vista, which is Valuing Incarcerated Scholars Through Academia, the first San Diego State University BA offered in a state prison, which graduated its first class of 29 students just this past year in 2025. It's just incredible. On top of this, she has also raised over $7 million in grants and contracts across both projects and is the recipient of grants from the National Endowment for the Arts and the Mellon Foundation, amongst others. She has numerous honors and awards, including, get this, Outstanding Faculty, the highest honor at California State University San Bernardino in 2019, and the inaugural Public Impact Award from San Diego State University in 2024. In addition to a community-based practice and leadership, Buckley is an accomplished author, art critic, editor, artist, and curator. She is the author, most recently, of, wait for it, Changemakers Guide to Prison Arts Programming, which was published in Routledge just this past year, 2026, which explores the first decade of creating prison arts collective through narrative reflection, research and theory, and practical tips. The fact that there's enough to write about the past 10 years just shows you how impactful her programming is and all of the work that she's doing. Her writing about contemporary art and culture is also widely published, including in over 100 reviews for artforum.com, as well as reviews and essays for Arts in America, Los Angeles Review of Books, The Huffington Post, KCET Artbound, and numerous other publications. Her collage and participatory art has been featured in galleries and public spaces for over 25 years, including at Los Angeles International Airport, and she's the curator of Psychic Outlaws at Luckman Art Gallery in 2010, and Disruption, Art and the Prison Industrial Complex at Pitzer Art Galleries 2019. Buckley has a BA from UC Berkeley and an MFA from Otis College of Arts and Design. Now, with all of that, I don't know how much time we have left for the rest of the interview, but I will bring her on board and we'll go ahead and begin this conversation because there's so much I want to know. I do want to add also, while I'm bringing her on stage, is that I do have the distinct pleasure and honor of working with Annie Buckley on the journal for the International Journal for Creativity Inside. And Ms. Buckley and I also had the opportunity to present together back at a conference in New Mexico on the International Council for Deans. So it is an honor and a privilege to bring you here, Annie, and to have this wonderful conversation with you. With all that you've done and your varied background, how did you end up here? How did you end up focused on the arts inside correctional systems? Tell me about that. I would imagine it's a fairly long journey. So tell me about that journey.
Thank you so much. It's so nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for all that you're doing. It's been so fun, like getting to know you and getting to know the work that you're doing and the intersections that we have. So I'm also excited to talk with you today. So thank you. Yes, the AC went on right as we started talking, and I can't figure out how to turn it off. So if it's too loud,
you're in San Diego. You're in San Diego. I think it's law to have air conditioning on at all times.
So okay. All right. So the journey, so it's interesting for me, the vision, the mission, the goal that I really kind of established for myself at a pretty young age was expanding access to the arts, period, full stop.
Full stop.
And so with that, I have done that in so many different ways, and I've been doing it for a long time. And that's really how the prison work came into it. But I will say that yeah, it started. So my first job out of college was as a bilingual teacher at Hoover Street School. And I taught in a school that was not very far from where I grew up, probably like 10, 15 minutes. But
Where did you grow up?
in LA, in like Mid-Wilshire area, Hancock Park in Los
What
Angeles.
part
Right
of
in the middle of LA.
What part again? I didn't.
Hancock Park.
I know exactly. I had lived in Long Beach State. So I
Oh,
went. Yeah, so I lived there for a while. So it's great to hear the geography. Wow. So you were right there in the center of it all.
and I went to, there are two schools. I went to a public school, but the school that I taught at was just a very different neighborhood, equally vibrant and incredible, but predominantly like first generation immigrants from Mexico, Central America, and just a different experience. And it just opened my eyes. I love my students. I love working there. I love learning about different cultures. And I also saw how the schools were so different and the limited access to the arts in that area, in that community. And it's something that I've just seen throughout my career. So I worked in multiple different LA Unified schools as a mentor for UCLA Graduate School of Education. And I went into schools in all different neighborhoods and just definitely saw that the arts are limited in terms of like who does have access to them. We know this, we hear this whenever budgets are cut, it's the first thing cut. But to see it firsthand just really made an impact on me. So I've been really interested in bridging that divide for as long as I can remember. So when I got and I've done it in many different ways, in a shelter for people who are unhoused when I was in college, at elementary schools, teaching art in different community centers. So when I started teaching at Cal State San Bernardino, I knew that I wanted to create curriculum where my students would have the opportunity to teach in the community and that we could bring arts into the local community as well. So I was reaching out to partners to find, people who wanted to partner to have students teach art in their spaces. And we worked with a local detention probation center for youth. We worked with a senior housing center. We worked with a really wonderful after school program in like a public housing project. And then the prison in Chino reached out, which has never happened. So everyone's like, how do you get into prisons? I was like, well,
They reached out to you. How did they?
they reached out to Kelsey San Bernardino.
Okay.
And my department chair was like, Annie, this seems like a good opportunity for you. And I was like, yeah. And it's really interesting though, how they reached out. So Cal State San Bernardino had donated a lot of printing equipment to I think that's what they said. This was a while ago. I think they had said there was some equipment there. So that's how come they reached out to us.
We'll create a whole new story. It's fine.
Yeah, it's a whole new story. So they reached out. So I asked the students in my classroom at the time, like, hey, I'm going to visit this prison. We're possibly going to teach there. And I think it was 7 students and like 6 out of 7 were like, yeah, I want to go. So we all went. We met our future students. We met the warden. We met different staff. And that particular part of the program, of the community-based art program, is just really what took off because the students were interested, because the people inside the prison were so eager and hungry, because we ended up getting funding. So that's really became Prison Arts Collective and is the core focus now, but that's where it came from.
That's amazing. I remember I had worked there in the 80s, and I got exposed to seeing. I worked with a number of gang members that were living in LA at the time in the late 80s. Of course, that was the big boon of many of the gangs that evolved over the years. And I saw the value of what art making was for them to create identity, create familial and interaction and reinforcements and a sense of self, which I found powerful. But then I started working in the prisons in Northern California. And that's when I started becoming exposed to the arts and corrections programming that was big. Especially in the 80s and 90s. We'll be talking in another episode with Mandy Gardner and Grady Hillman. How much was your work working in conjunction with the arts and corrections program that was already predominant in the state of California?
So interestingly, when I first started doing the work in Chino, I didn't know about that, and it was not currently funded. The funding got cut. I don't know exactly when, but a group of people advocated to bring it back. and that was like the year we started, so like 12 years ago is actually when it came back.
Okay.
And so there was this discussion from people at the prison, from students of mine, different people saying, oh, there's this grant, you should apply. So it came back, I think it was a year after we started, the funding came back. And we were not actually funded for the first like 2-3 years. We had some faculty grants from the university that I was able to get, like research grants, service learning grants. They were very supportive and generous, all of my like the leadership colleagues at Kelsey San Bernardino.
Mhm.
But we didn't get funding for the program until I think like the third year. But so it's kind of interesting. So we learned about it in conjunction and with kind of as we grew.
That's amazing. And so, I mean, we're going through the similar growing pains where a lot of our projects here at the Arts and Art Therapy with the Imprisoned, many of the grants that we have are internal grants. I mean, we do have a major grant for the Art Therapy in Prison program, but that's separate. So we're finding that that is the only way at this point to start funding some of the smaller programs. But then it took you 2 or 3 years later, after you had all these faculty who were willing to put their energy into providing these resources inside. Where was this big grant from? The big one that funded that continues to fund the program.
So we have a number. Oh gosh, it went off. Good. So I was like, oh, it's so stressful. It's probably so loud. Sorry, everyone
No,
about
it's
the
fine.
air. This is life, right?
It's fun
So
for the people that are driving in their cars that don't have air conditioning. They can live vicariously through you.
okay,
So that's
perfect.
good. That's really good.
Okay, perfect. I have a small unit in an office on campus, so nothing too fancy, but yes. Okay, so well, it's so interesting that we have funding from a number of places, but I just want to circle back, and then it's kind of interesting because you were saying that you were in LA, like working with some people in the 80s. So
Yeah.
that's the big time that there was a really, I think that's also when the Arts and Corrections got cut, because no, maybe it was in the 90s, because I know Grady was still doing it then. I think it
Grady
was
was
like the
doing it.
late 90s.
We'll
Yeah.
get confirmation of that on the next
Yeah.
episode because Grady will be on next. But
Yes, and he's so great. Him and Mandy have been so great. So for when I was teaching at Hoover, I also had the opportunity to meet. So one of my other inspirations is Homeboy Industries and Father Greg Boyle, who founded it, who is a family friend of ours because he taught my brothers in high school. So I knew him like most of my life, but very tangentially, right? Just like my parents knew him, my brother's teacher. And then when I was teaching at Hoover Street School, I went down to his office in Boyle Heights. That was like
for those
little small.
For those who are not familiar with that, give us a little synopsis of who that is, how important that person is.
Yeah, so now he's internationally recognized New York Times bestselling author and the founder of the largest gang intervention program in the world, and so it's really grown significantly. It's so incredible. But back then he was in his little small office just starting the program, and I was this teacher, and I was like, how can I help? And so at that time he was like, keep doing what you're doing. But over the years we've connected and I've done different things, but it's very inspiring to see what he was doing. And so it didn't feel like unfamiliar or like another population or like scary to go into a prison when I first started. And my mom, who passed away 8 years ago, but she also is one of my biggest inspirations. She taught in juvenile hall through getting connected with Father Greg and like him helping introduce her. And that's kind of who inspired her process. And she did that for almost 20 years. And I'd gone with her to teach the kids. And so it didn't feel like, I think sometimes people think of people in prison as some like other population, but they're all just part of our community. And for me, even though I personally don't have experience of incarceration or in my family, I knew people close to me who had been in those spaces. So I think that's kind of important in terms of like how and why we enter into these spaces.
Yeah, so that becomes part of your origin story about how you learn to kind of champion this. It's incredible work that you're doing. I have to, I don't know if I ever told you this, but for many years I would do these presentations at conferences or workshops or keynotes or whatnot, and I'd always have the transition slides of the arts inside correctional institutions and then art therapy. and what that transition looked like. And what I always talked about, there was always a slide where I would provide that would um, indicate the various arts and corrections programs that are influential around the country. The one in Michigan was always included. There's one up in New Jersey that I was familiar with, but always from the very beginning, the Prison Arts Collective was part of that.
Oh my gosh,
And
I
so,
love that.
yeah, so it was always, you know, it was such a huge influence to recognize how there are other people out there that are doing this work that we're not necessarily networked with, but that we need to kind of develop these relationships and do this work together. You founded the Prison Arts Collective. How long has the Prison Arts Collective been around?
So it started in 2013 and it was not called that at the time, but it's like where we all started. And that was that first visit with some of my students and then department chair Margaret Perry, who was so amazing. She's so amazing and she was so supportive to the Chino prison. We met the students or the potential students, right? And then from there, we started a pilot class, and the pilot basically just evolved and kept going and is now in like 18 different prisons because we set it up. We did say, like, one of her big points, which I really respect and we still keep to, is whatever we start, we're going to finish. Because a lot of the participants inside who we talked to were talking to us about how, programs came and left or they felt like abandoned, which can happen for any number of reasons, right? But it really struck us how curious and hungry they were to learn, how eager they were to participate in the programming. And then also, like, we got to finish what we start. So we started, I think it was like an 8-week pilot. And it was actually my students and graduate students who were teaching the classes. And I would go most of the time. But I tell this story in my book. It's kind of dramatic, but I did get really sick. Like, I had like a really bad diagnosis right after it started, and they kept going and they were teaching, they were giving me updates. And when I was able to go back in, it was just so obvious that, okay, this is something that's like meaningful to so many people. Like, let's find a way to keep this going. But it really is so truly collaborative because these grad students, staff at the prison, participants in the program, it just wouldn't happen without so many people all feeling like this is meaningful and important.
I don't think people understand the need for so many moving parts and so much collaboration and support on all different walks. So, of course, there's the obvious question that everybody gets asked when they're doing this work. Were there any roadblocks that you found, either institutional roadblocks? I'm assuming the answer is always going to be yes, but you have to ask it diplomatically. But tell me about what you did to overcome those and address some of those, both at the ground level where you're working with day-to-day staff and, of course, the administrative staff that's the higher-ups that help make the decisions. How did you negotiate those spaces?
Oh my gosh, that's such a good question. It's a big one because I think that anybody who does this work, like this, and anyone listening who does this work knows this, it's very complicated and it's very time consuming. And for every individual like hour of art experience, there's just hours upon hours of preparation and conversation and emails and memos. And, so there's a lot of like infrastructure behind any given art experience in prison. So I think that is really true. Like you said, there's so many. I think that, I don't know. I don't know that I have like one singular answer, but I think one thing that helps is remembering why we're doing this.
Okay.
So when it gets really hard or really tricky or even just sticky problems, like, okay, what's the problem here? What are we trying to solve for? What's our goal? And then what is like a reasonable possibility? Because it's never going to be exactly, I think you have to go into this work knowing that everything is a compromise. Yeah. Like, it's never going to be exactly what you might like envision. It's never going to be like this perfect art studio and as many hours as you want and what have you. So it's always going to be like, well, what do we want? We know we want to create these safe spaces that are creative and that are engaging and that are inclusive. So for as long as we can. So what can we do to make that happen, right? And then what has to go? Where do we have to give? Like, does that mean we're going to be in the culinary? Sure, let's go to the culinary. That's fine, because we can create that there. Does that mean that we have to go at a different time or go, less time. There's a lot of kinds of, I think for me, it's just like, remember the goal, remember the purpose. And then also to, I think that in big picture, and I think it in granular too. So when you're trying to like solve for a specific issue, it's also like, well, what are we trying to accomplish here? How can we do it? What are the options? I think that's one. And then I've been called tenacious like so many times in my life. I didn't even know what
I'm gonna go with that.
When I first got called, I didn't even know what it meant. I looked it up, but I remember being called that in like 8th grade. And I do think that you have to be persistent and be tenacious. I do think that I am. Like, if I really believe something is meaningful, like, I'll fight to try to make it happen. But you also have to compromise and have to hear what other people need. Like, we had to hear from the prison, like, well, here's, we want this to happen, but it has to be in this way. Like, I'm not one who's like, oh, the prison's like the evil. I don't know. I'm not speaking about the system, but the people are our partners, and we can work with those people, and we have to, because we can't do this without them.
An episode I just recorded earlier today was with the correctional officer up in Minnesota who experienced the loss of his partner, was murdered by one of the people inside. And instead of taking it out on the setting, he realized that it happened because there was no programming. He established a statewide arts and prison program. It's just amazing. You use
That's
the word
incredible.
he is incredible, and it's just such a wonderful episode. So I think it just speaks to that reminds us that the system itself may have some challenges, but that there are people inside that certainly want these things to occur. And you use the word compromise. I'm going to ask you, I think, what may end up being I hope an interesting question, but I have a context for it. On one hand, we often get asked by people, why are we providing services to sometimes for people that may not deserve them? And we know those questions. We often get asked, how can you go inside a prison? They're being punished for a reason we're offering services. On the other hand, I've also been asked, and we can visit that in just a moment, but I've also been asked, how can you go inside a facility like this and compromise? In other words, you're working with very disparate groups. And let me tell you this in a scenario. I was doing a keynote address once, and I had a wonderful audience, and it was just so fulfilling. But I got to a point where I was talking about the negotiations and the compromises that we have to offer and create in order to be able to do the work inside. And this is to a lot of our therapists and counselors and psychologists. And somebody raised their hand and said at the end, not unkindly, she said, how can you do this work and negotiate and compromise? Our role is, don't you think that we should go in and blow up the system because it doesn't work? And my response was, I'm all for people who are activists. They're all for advocacy. On the other hand, I'm a therapist. I'm an art therapist. I'm a teacher. I'm an educator. And remember what you're going in for. And the problem is when you go inside, if you blow up the system, the very people that you're going inside to help are the ones that are caught in the rubble. And so I have to constantly defend this notion of we have to find a space in between to be able to negotiate that space. Do you have those complications as well? Or those things that you've heard sometimes where like, how can you even do that?
My perspective is this. I think it takes all of us. And I think of it kind of like a big orb where everyone is going to be situated in different locations around that. And they're all going to be sort of like pushing on the issue or the problem or whatever the thing is in different ways. And in this case, with like corrections and offering programming and whether or not the system should exist and the justice system as a whole, which is also problematic, everyone is going to play a part to make a difference and to improve the system. I don't think that everyone can do everything, like at all. But like what you said, as a therapist, there's something that you can do and you can make a difference in that way. But then if we take, say, like a defense attorney or an attorney general or a corrections officer, they can do something different in a different way. So I think it's not, or like an activist or somebody who wants to like change the whole system. Yeah. But I just don't think that we can do everything all at once, each individual. So for me, what I've decided, what I've thought about and talked to my collaborators with here at PAC and also with VISTA, the BA program, is like, okay, what can we do to make a difference within this while we're here? And how can we build healthy communities with people inside and outside together? And how can we build collaborative, productive relationships with people who work in this system to make a difference and maybe change some minds along the way, right? And also maybe learn some things and change our own minds in certain ways too, right?
Yeah.
So I think that is my perspective on that, but I've definitely heard all of those different, like, why do that?
Tell me about. I know we've all learned a great deal by doing this work. Is there anything that sticks out that you remember? Wow, I just learned something that's so impactful and so powerful, and it's not something that I expected to learn from going in there. What is there any particular nugget of something that you've learned that you say, yes, this is I wasn't even aware of this?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. I think there's a lot, but the two things that come to mind are humanity and art as a human, right? So like really the human tie-in, because ever since we first started, and I know people hear this a lot when they're doing this work, but what really made an impact on me when we first started was people saying, when you come, we feel human. When you come, you bring the humanity. And at first it really struck me like, wow, because I guess I took it for granted, right? I know there's probably people who did question their humanity because of lots of terrible situations, but I hadn't ever really like stopped to think like, feeling human in this moment, right? But the way that they were living this very institutionalized life, it was an experience to feel human. So I think that's really important. Not only the arts and the community building that we do can bring that, but also that is something that is of value and that is a privilege that we have to be able to not know that, like, to not think about, oh, I feel human right now, right? Like that's a privilege that I hadn't really ever thought about.
Yeah, I mean, the institution is designed to take that away. It's easier to control those that we objectify and dehumanize. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. It's just the way the system works in order to succeed. And what we're doing, I'm hoping, is rehumanizing and de-objectifying.
I think that is so true. One of the things I did learn in a couple different talks I've had over the years, not frequently, but when I have talked with Father Greg from Homeboy about this, he said, I brought some of my students to him several years ago, and he gave us some advice, and he was like, use everyone's names, use their first name, which we tried to do, but once he said it, we kind of re-emphasized it, and I think it was important for my students to hear, because I think sometimes they felt like, oh, well, they said they prefer, this last name. But sometimes that's because they maybe haven't felt comfortable or known that it was an option to use the first name. So we really shifted to try to do that. And we do it pretty consistently. And people do notice it. And it creates a different space where now you're being called by your name and not by a number and not by a last name. I remember one student, I called him by his name and he got so shocked. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry. Did I mispronounce your name? And he said, no, I just haven't heard myself called that in like 20 years.
Wow.
So that's really striking.
That's and that never ceases to give me chills when I hear somebody come back and say that. One of the benefits that I find about the work that we do and the art that we do is we recognize one of our pioneers of our field. One of the people that started the art therapy field would emphasize, and this wasn't her idea, but we took advantage of this because that's what we do. Is this notion that the art is the person, and what they create is the person. And my own theoretical perspective of social interactionism is basically creating relationships through these interactions. And the very act of accepting an art piece from somebody means that in essence, you're accepting that person. And for many people, that especially many people inside, that's something profoundly new for them, to be accepted at that level, and to recognize that we're protecting that piece.
That's so cool. That reminds me of one of the things that one of my early mentors, I haven't talked to him in a long time, but Bob Bates, he founded Inner City Arts in Los Angeles. Yeah. And I remember him saying to me, art is not therapy, but all the arts are therapeutic.
Yes.
And I really have carried that with me, because we're not doing art therapy like you are, and that's a different practice, but they're so interrelated. But just the practice and experience of pulling something out of yourself that you maybe couldn't put into words a lot of the times, and putting that on paper, and the impact of that is therapeutic. And the community building that we do. So we always do try to emphasize that, because of course you want to draw a line because it's not the same thing, but there's this communal sensibility that happens.
I'm discovering as I get older that I think that line is blurred. I think
Mm.
I wrote a blog post once and I used to have a blog on Psychology Today called Art on Trial: Confessions of a Serial Art Therapist. And I think my very last blog, I did it for 3 years. My last post was called Art in Prison. Is it therapy or is it therapeutic? And so what?
Mm.
And the big question
Mm.
is the so what? I mean, I think, I take responsibility for my own field where sometimes we feel like we own that process, we own the art. And the fact is the artists inside and the art therapists stand on the shoulders of the giants of those who, use the arts inside to see the therapeutic value of art making. So we don't own it. We didn't invent it. I think that's why we can all work together well, as long as we recognize that we have that shared language.
That's really cool. One of my former students, Jess Minkley, I think you know her. I
Oh
think you
yes,
know
just
them.
Binkley, of
Yeah.
course.
They
Yeah.
just did she was they were my former student at Otis, and just did a little
Oh my goodness.
art therapy session for our team, and we're going to start doing some things together. So it's really funny because I know on my Facebook page, Jess was like, "Do you know Dave Gusick?" So anyway, it's so funny.
We'll give
It's so
Jess
cool.
my best. Yeah,
I know it's
that's
really
awesome.
nice to reconnect. So the thing that about the arts and corrections, you asked this a while ago, and it's a little bit of a segue, but I wanted to circle back.
Oh, it's great.
It was it was so interesting because once we started this program and we were doing it, that we opened my eyes, all these people who've been doing this work through California primarily, but really all across the country. I mean, there was just a big one in California, but there was obviously in other parts too. And this arts and corrections funding that many people advocated for to came back like right as we were starting. So it was such funny, odd timing. But the first grants that we got were from corrections, CDCR, California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. So that was pretty interesting. So we got innovative program grants, and we have through the years. Then we got a contract with Arts and Corrections. And then we've had many other ones over the years. So that it is like interesting to plug into this history, but also be part of what I really have experienced to be sort of a new wave of it. I think we do think about the arts and the way Arts and Corrections functions a little bit differently, because obviously things evolve over time. And so at first we always felt like, oh, I don't know if we're even doing the same thing. But as we've come to know some of the providers who've been doing it for a long time, we realize like there's similar goals. But one of the things that we do at PAC is to have it really mirror like an integrated art class. So we have some art history or culture building. We always bring that in to help our students understand how they're part of a bigger picture or a bigger narrative of art over time. And then we also do the art making, of course, that's like the key part. And then we also do some kind of reflection or discussion, and then some kind of like grounding or safe space activity. So we do those 4 things in every single class. So I think it's sort of a model that is maybe similar to some others, but was a little bit different from some of the original programming that we knew about.
It sounds like there is a definitive beginning, middle, and end. That there's a recognition that sometimes you've got to open them up, and then before they leave, you've got to close them again for safety reasons.
That's so interesting. I love that. And we have talked over the years about like a closing circle and different teachers. What's really cool is we have so many teachers now and teaching artists, and everyone interprets it their own way, but a lot of times at the end it is more like a looking at the art, talking about it, and giving that reflection space. So yeah, it does do that kind of like closing of whatever like parts of them that maybe we're open.
I love that you bring in art history as well, because it puts them in the context as well. It's not something
Totally.
held at arm's length. They're part of that now.
100%. And so many of the so a lot of our students have never participated in art before. That's that whole access piece. But some are self-taught from inside prison. And so then we're able to say like, oh, here's this artist who maybe look at this artist because they're doing something similar, sort of similar things that happen in grad school or in like a BA program where you're making work and then someone's like, oh, these might be artists you could look at. And I think that's really helps build not only their art practice, but their identity as like a person interacting in this space beyond kind of how they perceive of themselves previously. So I do think there's an identity building aspect that happens too.
Yeah, I love that you opened up that definition of identity, because whenever I talk about creating new labels and new identities through the art process, I don't mean creating artists. I mean creating and retaking the identity of human and recognizing their place in those interactions and dynamics, that the art helps facilitate those dynamics. So I loved how you've opened up that definition.
That's really, really cool. I think that, so one other thing that I've seen the biggest change with our participants, probably because we work with them the longest, is our arts facilitator training program. So we have essentially a teacher training. It's like a 3-month program with then of learning. A lot of them are like, "Whoa, this is a lot of reading." So we're like, "Yes, this is a different class. If you want an art class, you probably won't want this one." And then it's followed by a 3-month apprenticeship. And so then we have peer facilitators teaching a lot of our programming, and we mentor them and we provide supplies, and a lot of those peer facilitators have been with us for many years, and so we kind of get to know and see their like development and interaction over time. So that's been really special, and many of them who've gotten out, some of them we've hired to work for us, and many work with other nonprofits.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. What that experience is like for you when they get out and they reach out to you. I mean, obviously it's a softball of a question, but it just must be so overwhelming to see the success that you've helped establish.
Oh my gosh, that's so interesting, because when it first started happening that folks would reach out, I mean, the first time I got a call and it was one of our peer facilitators who had gotten out, it was just like amazing. Like you would say, just like there's the softball, because it's just like, wow, of course you just feel so moved, so excited. And as it continued, I will say there's also an element of like overwhelm, because we're not set up to support that process. And I personally, like, they would call it the university, because obviously it's not, they're calling it my office. But even so, I want to help. And so I'd reach out to other people I know in other nonprofits or former alumni or former students. Okay, who can we connect this person to? But that can become a whole full-time thing, right?
A whole other position, right?
Totally. So we have had many conversations as a team over the years about how we can and want to support that, and also who we can like partner with, because, and then how many, there's only so much money. We try to hire as many people as we can who are ready and eager and fit and need. But we also try to refer people. And luckily here at least in Southern California, there's so many really strong, amazing reentry groups. So I think we've gotten to a good place with it. But just to be perfectly honest, there was a period of time where I was like, oh my gosh, I want to help everyone, but I don't think we're set up for this. And I was
There's a lot of responsibility. I would feel, because it's happening a little bit now to me. And first, it's fascinating, it's amazing, and I love it. On the other hand, as much as I love it, there's this overwhelming sense of responsibility. Like, I went in, created all these spaces, created a space for our interaction dynamic to see the value of what you were doing. And now I feel responsible to continue that, maintain that after you get it. That's a lot, How do we
It really,
that?
It really is. That was, so for us, we identify different partners, and we do bring folks in, and we briefly started an alumni network that's sort of been off and on. It kind of speaks to how we have this main mission, and then this is what we can do with it. But I think it's a worthwhile question for all of the things you're saying. And it's not an easy answer, but I think finding partners who know that work and do that work is a really effective way of doing it. But like I say, we also have a lot of the team here with us, because when we have openings and bring them on board, we do. Well, that's really cool too.
The last thing I want to hit upon, because there's just so many things for us to talk about. I mean, unfortunately, we're time limited, but there's this one thing I just would love for you to discuss, because I love this, and this has become such a drive for me that I'm so happy you're already doing it. Through the Prison Arts Collective, you've got this almost clearinghouse of this art that you collect, and almost an online database of some of the images and some of the work that's out there. How did that develop? And I mean, that's a lot of work. I mean, I can't underscore that enough, because I've wanted to create such a thing, and it's overwhelming. How do you tell me about that? I think that's the best way to start that question.
So our whole exhibition program only ever came about because participants asked us. I will say, like, just broad picture that I didn't really touch on is we try to be responsive and community based, and that's the foundation of the program. So it really has, like, if you I know you have the book, which is so cool. You just showed it. For anyone who reads the new book, you'll see it's a very organic growth. Yeah. So the growth of this program was very organic because it is responsive to needs and interests and requests. And with that, you always have this ebb and flow of like how much to spend, how much to drift off of the core mission to do these other things, how much does it relate? And I think the reentry piece and the exhibition piece both kind of fall into that. So with the exhibition piece, it also came from participants saying to us like, hey, we show our work. I will never forget, this guy said to me, we want people to know that we're not all evil. And I was like, and when I'm in there teaching, and all of our team, I think, I can't speak for them, but I'm guessing they would all feel the same way. We're just teaching our students. Like, yes, we had to go through multiple gates and memos and blah, blah, blah to get there. But once we're there, we're just there with our students. We're not like doing anything else or thinking about anything they did before that space. It's just very present and about who you are in that moment, which I think is like really beautiful. And so they asked for us to show their work. And so we started, one of my friends in LA, Clyde Beswick, he had a gallery called CB1. And I was connected to a lot of different like galleries and such in the art world, just being an artist and writer. So I was sort of like asking around, but Clyde just, raised his hand right away. Yeah, I'll have a show. He had a beautiful gallery in downtown LA. So we had an exhibition, and the whole vision was to just have it in a traditional gallery space and bring people in. And the opening was so cool because it had like family members of the artists, and then it had like the regular like people who would typically go to the gallery, who maybe it was the family members, but oftentimes it wasn't always the same populations, all mixed in, nonprofit groups, teachers, artists, students. Like, it was so beautiful. It was such a beautiful merging that you don't necessarily always see in like a big city art gallery. And so that's where it all started. So with that one, we learned that in California at that time, and still true almost always today, but not always, the only way to remove the art is if the artist donates it to the program. So we had a lot of discussions and moral thinking about, is this appropriate? Do we want to do this? And so we explained that to them. And we said, if we ever sell it, we'll always buy art supplies and anything to continue the program. But we can't give it back to you. So don't donate if you want to keep it. And then we got to more work than we possibly knew what to do with. So then I said to them, my teacher says, like, you guys, like, one piece a semester, it's too much, because you got to be the steward of this artwork, as you're knowing. And then so we had people were really eager and interested to participate and to share their work, and they don't really have anywhere to store it, and some people don't have like connections outside, so a lot of people wanted to give us their art. But we try to be really mindful and only take a limited amount, one per semester, one per year. We don't even do semester anymore. So as we were gathering the work, and we've had many exhibitions since. We had one outside of the Governor Newsom's office in the state capitol.
Wow.
That was incredible. And we've had them at galleries, museums, cafes, all kinds of places. So when the art comes in, we photograph it, we scan it, we document it. And then I've been so lucky to partner, because I am a professor here at San Diego State, and because my programs mostly are through like the University Research Foundation grant funding, or like with Vista directly through SDSU, I can also work with the university. So the San Bernardino Library, Cal State San Bernardino, and the SDSU Library both were eager and willing to create these archives. So so that's why, and the SDSU Library, which has the current archive, has also opened their doors that they would be willing to do like a more global one. So that's where you and I had that conversation, and we're just waiting for partners that we can like build out the archive with other works from different places.
Well, count us in. It's just an amazing resource. We'll definitely have more conversations about that. And as I close this out, I do want to also underscore one of my The reason I love this work is besides what we give and what we take and what we get from doing this work with working with those inside and see the value of all that we offer. We do get to work with the good people and we get to work with wonderful collaborators. And I'm just so happy that along with everything else that you're also on our advisory board for the International Journal for Creativity Inside, which I can announce now. By the time this comes out, the first issue will already have been released. But we just found out that we're ready to submit it today, so it's going to go live by tonight or tomorrow. So we have our first issue out. So
Oh my gosh, amazing.
Yeah,
I'm
it's-
so excited. Thank you for including me in that venture. It's so exciting.
including you. You're the first article in the journal. You're the very first issue, the very first
Wow.
article of the very first issue.
Wow.
You're
Well,
it.
thank you. It's amazing. It's so cool to meet people from all over the world doing this work. Like you've really opened those doors to me in a way that I didn't see as many people doing it globally. So it's so exciting.
And I'm very gratified to hear that. I know they all are as well. It's wonderful to be part of this amazing team, and hopefully through this podcast, this team will get bigger and bigger. So thank you so much, Annie. I wish we can continue speaking. We do have to bring this to a close, but I just to have you on this episode. Thank you very much. Once again, this is Ms. Annie Buckley from the Prison Arts Collective, reaching out to us from well air conditioned San Diego. And for being on this episode of Creativity Unconfined. I am ever grateful. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It was so great talking with you.
Creativity Unconfined has been brought to you by Florida State University's Institute for Arts and Art Therapy with the Imprisoned. Special thanks to our producers Sydney Nichols and Malia Burrows, as well as Florida State University's College of Fine Arts. If you like what you heard, and even if you didn't, please support us by liking and subscribing.